In the grand halls of Windsor Castle, amid the pomp of a royal state banquet and the glitter of ceremonial pageantry, one question reverberates far beyond the United Kingdom. Who is standing firmer with Ukraine, Prime Minister Keir Starmer or US President Donald Trump? Both leaders have made high-profile pledges of support during Trump's September 2025 visit to the UK. Yet behind the smiles and handshakes lie two very different approaches. Britain under Starmer has consistently branded its support for Ukraine as unwavering, framing it as a moral obligation and a strategic necessity. Trump, meanwhile, has expressed frustration at the cost of war, hinted at diplomacy that might involve compromises, and insisted that Europe bear more of the burden. This is not merely a debate about political rhetoric. It is about the future of Ukraine's survival, NATO's credibility, and the West's unity against Russia. The war in Ukraine has now stretched into its fourth year since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022. Ukraine's resilience has stunned the world, but its endurance has always depended on Western support. The United States and the United Kingdom are two of Kyiv's most critical backers, financially, militarily, and diplomatically. Under former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, the UK built a reputation as one of Kyiv's strongest allies. Starmer, who came into office in July 2024, has largely carried that mantle forward, calling Ukraine's struggle a fight for freedom everywhere. The US, under both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, has been Ukraine's largest single donor. But with Trump's return to the White House in January 2025, questions have resurfaced about how committed Washington truly is. Trump's America First instincts, combined with domestic opposition within the Republican Party to foreign entanglements, have injected uncertainty into US policy. Thus, when Trump landed in Britain for his second state visit, the first US president in history to receive such an honour, the backdrop was not just pageantry, but an unresolved strategic dilemma. Do London and Washington still see Ukraine through the same lens? Let's look at the evidence. In August 2025, just weeks before Trump's arrival, Starmer reiterated that the UK's support for Ukraine was unwavering. He stressed that any peace settlement must include robust security guarantees for Kyiv and respect Ukraine's internationally recognized borders. That phrasing, unwavering, has become central to his policy language. According to the UK Parliament's research briefings, Britain has committed around £12.8 billion in support since the war began, with nearly £7.8 billion of that being military assistance. Deliveries have included long-range Storm Shadow missiles, air defence systems, tanks and extensive training programmes for Ukrainian soldiers. The UK also took the lead in convening the 2025 London Summit on Ukraine, bringing together allies to hammer out proposals for a long-term peace plan. London has been at the forefront of sanctions against Moscow and has worked to build a coalition of the willing with France and others to prevent any premature compromise. While the US remains the largest donor overall, Trump has frequently signalled fatigue. He has pushed European allies to contribute more and has suggested that the US should not carry an unequal share. At times, he has emphasised diplomacy over battlefield outcomes, fueling speculation that Washington might accept a settlement that falls short of Kyiv's full demands. Recent US arms transfers have been routed through a new arrangement known as the PURL system, Prioritised Ukraine Requirements List. Under this mechanism, weapons are supplied from US stockpiles, but the costs are covered by NATO allies rather than the US Treasury. While efficient, critics argue it is another sign of Washington shifting the burden. Reports have surfaced of pauses in certain aid packages and even interruptions in intelligence sharing. Analysts at the UK's House of Lords Library note that the US has begun exploring more direct diplomacy with Russia, something that alarms Kyiv and some European capitals. This divergence raises the key question: is Trump's America pulling back while Starmer's Britain steps forward? Several points of tension highlight the differences. Trump argues that the US cannot bankroll a war indefinitely while Europe sits back. Starmer, by contrast, frames support as a joint moral duty, rarely speaking about costs. Trump faces pressure from Republicans aligned with the MAGA movement, who question why billions are being spent abroad instead of at home. Starmer's Labour Party, while not immune to public fatigue, faces less partisan opposition. Most of the UK political spectrum broadly supports Ukraine. Trump has publicly said that it takes two to tango, a phrase many interpreted as partial blame on Kyiv for prolonging the war. Starmer has avoided such framing, consistently placing responsibility squarely on Moscow. The US under Trump appears more willing to prioritize an end to fighting, even if that means compromises. Britain has been more outspoken that any peace must not reward Russian aggression. The divergences may widen in coming months. Key developing angles include peace talks, pressure. Will Trump push Zelensky into negotiations, while Starmer insists on full territorial integrity? Economic leverage. Trump tied his UK visit to a massive £150 billion US investment package in Britain. Could such deals influence London's Ukraine stance in the long run? NATO's role. Trump has hinted that NATO allies must take greater responsibility, even threatening tariffs if they don't. Britain, however, continues to champion NATO unity. Domestic opinion. In the US, polls show growing scepticism of aid. In the UK, while fatigue exists, broad support still leans toward backing Kyiv. It would be simplistic, however, to frame this as a binary story of Britain good, America bad. The reality is far more complex. For one, the United States remains Ukraine's single largest supporter, both financially and militarily. Even under Trump's administration, Washington has continued to approve major weapons transfers. The PURL system, while shifting costs to allies, still delivers advanced US technology, missiles, artillery and armoured vehicles that Kyiv desperately needs. Furthermore, the US intelligence community continues to play a vital role. Ukraine relies heavily on satellite imagery, signals intelligence and real-time battlefield assessments provided by Washington. While some reports hint at pauses or conditionality, the infrastructure of US support remains unmatched. On the British side, there are limits as well. London cannot match Washington's sheer scale of aid. Its contributions, while significant in per capita terms, remain smaller in absolute numbers. Britain's economy, still recovering from Brexit shocks and post-pandemic stagnation, has limited fiscal space. The unwavering rhetoric may outpace Britain's actual capacity if the war drags on for several more years. There's also the question of public opinion. In both countries, fatigue is setting in. In the US, a Pew survey in mid-2025 showed declining support for continued aid, particularly among Republican voters. In Britain, polls indicate support remains strong, but concerns about rising energy bills and inflation mean that enthusiasm could wane. Lastly, both Starmer and Trump face political incentives. Starmer wants to brand himself as a statesman capable of global leadership, especially after years of conservative rule. Trump, by contrast, seeks to position himself as a deal maker, someone who can end wars quickly, even if through compromise. Both narratives are shaped by domestic politics as much as by Ukraine's battlefield needs. So, who is more loyal to Ukraine? On balance, Keir Starmer's Britain currently projects a more consistent and morally uncompromising stance. The language of unwavering support, the hosting of summits, and the emphasis on territorial integrity send a clear signal. London does not intend to abandon Kyiv. Donald Trump's United States, by contrast, remains deeply involved but is sending mixed signals. Aid continues, weapons arrive, but the rhetoric of burden sharing, the push for peace talks, and occasional suggestions of Ukrainian responsibility create ambiguity. To allies and adversaries alike, ambiguity can be destabilizing. That does not mean Trump is disloyal, only that his definition of loyalty differs. For him, loyalty may mean defending US interests first, even if that means asking Ukraine or Europe to shoulder more of the fight. For Starmer, loyalty appears tied to values and alliances, even when costly. The consequences of this divergence are profound. If Washington reduces its direct role, London may struggle to fill the gap. If Britain insists on principle while America pushes for compromise, unity could fracture, something Moscow would surely exploit. Ultimately, Ukraine's survival depends not on whether Starmer or Trump is more loyal individually, but on whether their two nations can align on strategy. For now, the signals remain mixed. And so the question remains, is America under Trump still the reliable anchor of Ukraine's defense, or is Britain under Starmer becoming the steadier ally? For viewers, the debate is not academic. The future of NATO, the stability of Europe, and the balance of global power hinge on these choices. In the coming weeks, watch closely. Will Trump press harder for negotiations with Russia? Will Starmer continue to lead European initiatives on sanctions and military aid? And most importantly, will Ukraine get the consistent support it needs to win, or will the cracks in Western unity grow wider? What do you think? Is Trump playing a clever diplomatic game, or is Britain the last truly loyal ally Ukraine can count on? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this debate is far from over.